afternoon. I'm April Davis, and this is Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery. And we're talking about recovery and addiction as we do every Sunday afternoon here at 1 p.m. on WOKV. And today we're talking about dealing with cravings and triggers, which includes people, places, things, and we'll get into that in just a moment. We have to introduce our guest here today. We have Erin Moran. She's often here with us on Sunday. She's the clinical director of Soft Roast Recovery in Jacksonville. She's a licensed mental health counselor and certified group practitioner, and she has her master's in clinical mental health counseling from the University of North Florida. And I'm going to talk about outside activities outside of work today because we have a new guest that we'll get to in just a moment. And Erin likes to spend her time working as a therapist and clinical director, snuggling with her dog and cat, practicing yoga, and taking trips to the mountains. And of course, Marvel shows and movies. So welcome, Erin.
Yeah.
Linsey's here today as well. A therapist has joined us a few times here on Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery. Linsey Mizic is a registered clinical mental health intern, and she has her master's in clinical mental health counseling. Therapy styles incorporate cognitive behavioral therapy for Linsey, solution-focused therapy, and mindfulness therapy. And she likes to do a few things outside of work. She loves her animals too, playing sports, and learning how to cook and grill. So we'll have to go visit her at her house.
Yes.
And we have another therapist with us today as well, Wilhelmina Kohn. And she has her master's in counseling from Webster University. Her degree concentration was mental health and school guidance. She has more than a decade of experience in the field of child welfare, substance abuse treatment as well. And she began her career working at Gateway Community Services right here in Jacksonville. And when she's not working, she enjoys DIY projects. We want to know what that is, but she also loves a great laugh and being among family and friends. So welcome, ladies. Happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. So we are talking about cravings and what it means when someone says they're struggling with a craving or might have triggers to use, Erin.
Yeah. So this can mean a couple of different things to each individual. So cravings and triggers can be something that is physical. So a physical craving might be, I might even need you guys to jump in and help me to describe what a physical craving might be, but it could be a physical craving, it could be a mental or emotional craving, it could be a social craving. So it's these internal and external factors that are really increasing the preoccupation with use. The desire to re-engage in the substance is heightened. You know, so someone might have a period where they feel okay in their sobriety or, not worrying about using and feeling really good. A trigger or a craving is an experience where all of a sudden it's saying like, I'm really wanting to use, again, whether it's to avoid pain, whether it's to increase pleasure, but there's something that's going on either internally, our thoughts, our feelings, or externally. This could be being around friends or family. This could be in a place that we used to use, and all of a sudden now it's like, I am wanting to go back to this substance, and it's really hard to stay sober. So
I feel like that makes sense. And I think we all can say the word triggers has become kind of commonplace. So, it can trigger feelings, it can trigger emotions, and also it could trigger your desire to use. So I know we were talking about possible physical things that might come about, Wilhelmina.
Well, I think when a client speaks about triggers, sometimes most important thing is people, places, and things. And sometimes when we're in places that our previous use is associated with, maybe say a restaurant or something, and alcohol is present, that can be somewhat of a trigger. 'Cause people previously, they associate restaurants with alcohol, and sometimes in early recovery it can be a challenge to go to a restaurant that has a bar or of that sort. So that can be a trigger as well, which is associated physically, because
Yeah, it could be the physical location or the physical components of that, right? The experience of being in a space where you're used to drinking or using whatever your drug of choice may be. But also the idea we talk a lot about with clients is like the phenomenon of craving. And that's often the physical piece. So when we think about the phenomenon of craving, that may be clients are having dreams and they wake up and they're like, I felt like I could taste it. You know, like I felt like I was, you know, when I woke up, I actually felt like I was a little high. I had to remember where I was. So that's a huge part of the physical pieces is to acknowledge when they're experiencing it specifically based on the trigger of a space, people, places, and things, kind of like Wilhelmina said.
It's sort of like the body sensation of the body remembers. It remembers everything, and it's that sensation of I remember what it used to feel like to use, whether that's alcohol or another drug. I remember the sensation of, you know, hitting my tongue, of the flavor of it, of, you know, the initial high experience with it. So it's the body is sort of saying like, oh, I remember that and I kind of want that. And even if there's another part that's saying I don't want that, you know, or that's really scary and maybe uncomfortable that I'm having this physical sensation, that's a trigger. That's a craving that is coming up, that is showing up in your body.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. Whether it be, I mean, sometimes, whatever addiction you might have, you probably have a trigger that can remind you of those sensations. And so if you have questions about this, and if maybe that's an issue for you, that maybe you've been sober for a while and you start having these cravings and you're not really sure why, you can always call Soft Roast Recovery with questions. If you think maybe you need to go back into rehabilitation, that's something you can also ask about. Their phone number is 904-439-4805. Again, Soft Roast Recovery in Jacksonville, 904-439-4805. I'm April Davis. You're listening to Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery, and we have a couple of therapists here with us from Soft Roast Recovery, as well as the clinical director, and we're talking about cravings, dealing with them, triggers. And I'm just curious, now that we know kind of the signs, I would imagine that's a problem, you know, and you're talking about someone who's in sobriety, in recovery, and they get these. And so what needs to happen when they get a craving? I mean, just acknowledge it, talk to someone.
Say it out loud.
Right. I think most importantly, in regards to when we have those cravings, we always encourage our clients to ensure that they're telling on themselves, maybe sharing that with someone, you know, if they're having that experience. I think that's important. Transparency with that is extremely important. It also helps keep the client safe, right? So they tell themselves, maybe they engage in some form of distraction or some kind of, you know, coping skill to help reduce or, you know, distract themselves from those thoughts, those increased tense cravings.
Yeah. I'm moving on to our next discussion point. I jumped ahead a little bit, but so clearly if you have a craving, you're going to need to know, what do you do when that comes up in your life? Because I'm guessing that is inevitable for anyone who is sober and in recovery.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about addiction, we're teaching relapse prevention. I was actually just discussing this yesterday with a client, and they had made a comment and said, I feel like maybe you're like trying to prepare me for it to happen. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for. And I was like, that's not to say it will, but that's to say it most definitely can, right? Because this is a relapse prone disease. And so to acknowledge when the cravings happen, that's super normal, you know, to have the desire to want or to do the thing that numbed those parts of you that you struggled with, or maybe made things more exciting or more interesting, is super normal. But to come back to what Wilhelmina was saying, is telling on yourself is so important, because when you say it out loud, we often say it cuts the craving in half, right? Then when you tell another set of ears, it cuts it more. So for every time you say it, you're building accountability, and now it's on 2 sets of other eyes, 2 sets of other ears, and now you have people around you going, hey, what are you doing? Hey, how are you feeling? What are you up to? And sometimes that can be annoying and frustrating, but that also speaks to the willingness to want to be sober and what accountability looks like. And so the more that you share, the more relief you feel and the less power the craving has.
Yeah. But we all know secrets make us sick.
Yes, they do.
So if that is not put out there, if you try to keep it inside and you try to harbor that, what can that do to your recovery?
I think it can set you on a path to relapse very quickly. You know, and not only do our secrets keep us sick, but I can think very fast. I can talk myself in my own head down a rabbit hole spiral in the matter of seconds. When I speak it just out loud to myself, I've already slowed my thought process down. I'm now having to pause a little bit and saying, oh, do I really want to do that? Does that really feel aligned with myself? And then when I say it to another person, it's this other part of, now we can talk about it together. Now we can say, like, well, yeah, of course you're having cravings. It's the first time that you're around, you know, other people drinking maybe, or, you know, of course you're having cravings. This has been a place where maybe you have used in the past, or of course this is a really stressful environment. You know, we're going to have those thoughts, we're going to have those feelings, we're going to have those body sensations. Speaking it and allowing us to get that support and to slow our thoughts, to slow our mind, allows us to choose, gives us the option to choose something different.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking that makes life kind of difficult to navigate sometimes because, you know, you're trying to stay sober, you're trying not to use, and you're thinking, okay, how do I do that and then still enjoy life and still enjoy some of the things I used to like to do without drinking or picking up. And so we can talk about that and after the break. Right now I just want to give out the phone number and we'll talk about some of the things that you can do when you have a craving, when a trigger occurs. And if you have questions about recovery, and if you just don't know if you have an addiction issue, you can call Soft Roast Recovery anytime. Their phone number is 904-439-4805. Again, Soft Roast Recovery, 904-439-4805. You're listening to Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery. You are listening to Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery. Welcome back on this Sunday. I'm April Davis, here along with Erin Moran, who is the clinical director of Soft Roast Recovery here in Jacksonville. Linsey Mizic, she is a senior therapist, and Wilhelmina Kohn is joining us today. She's a therapist at Soft Roast as well. So welcome, ladies. Happy to have you here as always. And we are talking about dealing with cravings and triggers, and we want to talk about what actually happens, or what can you do if you're in recovery and you're like, oh my goodness, I really want a glass of wine, I want a beer, whatever your drug of choice was. And so you can do things to make sure, Wilhelmina, that you plan ahead.
Yeah, most definitely. In regards to planning ahead, I think it's very important. Say you have a client who is early in recovery and they are asked to come to a birthday party or some family function or maybe a holiday, which is can be a trigger for most clients. But we have to be aware, the client must be aware and honest with themselves in regards to, okay, is there going to be alcohol at this party? Like, what's going to be going on? Just playing that scenario out in their head and being honest, like, am I ready? You know, am I prepared to be in that type of situation? I think when we're honest with that, we're able to kind of create some form of preparation, or maybe if we go into that environment, it becomes a trigger for us, right? We have to be aware that what is our way of escaping, so to speak. Like, what can we do to maybe prepare to exit, or maybe have a some form of a plan to, you know, I think that's important, right?
Yeah.
Because there will be celebrations.
There will be, right? But we have to not be in a place. Sometimes I feel like clients are in a place of denial, as if, you know, this is a place, this is a situation that I can handle. And then we find ourselves in that place, and then we're on tempting grounds. But if we're honest, you know what, you know, I don't think I'm ready just yet to be in that type of environment, and maybe I should disassociate myself and maybe step back from this particular event, right? I think
Either way, don't go, or perhaps, you know, just make sure you have a plan
right.
if you're going to be there. That makes complete sense. And I know, Linsey, you were saying you have an acronym that you like to put out there.
Yeah, when we're talking about things like, so for the example that Wilhelmina just made, let's say you go to a holiday, a birthday party, a wedding or something, I tell clients things that you identify as cravings and as triggers to have the plan for are things that make you feel safe, happy, and healthy. So the acronym is just SH, so that you remember it. Safe, happy, and healthy. And so that might be realizing, you know, I have a buddy system when I go to this birthday party or this wedding. You know, I have a person with me that knows that these are things that I need to do, right? Maybe I need to step away and I need to do some grounding techniques, or, you know, maybe there's a dog at this birthday party and that makes me feel happy. That'll help me calm down, right? Something that can help partner with that, so that you have things to go to, right?
Yes.
Kind of like thinking about what do I have in my toolbox and how can I use it.
I like your acronym because it reminds you to be peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're using,
Yeah.
there is not peace in your life. You need the
Yeah,
acronym.
and a lot of the time, and I use that one so often of saying things that make you feel safe, happy, and healthy, because that's not the same for everyone, right? Things that make me feel safe may be different. Things that make me feel happy are different. Things that are healthy for me might be different, right?
Yeah.
Still being able to know that that's such a huge realm to explore, and you can always be learning something new.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me because definitely different environments for different people
Yep.
mean different things.
Absolutely.
And I could feel perfectly fine in a bar after being sober for, a few months, and a lot of people would not, You just
Exactly.
have, I know you are very good about concentrating on specific plans for each individual, Erin. And so I think you had something to say. We were talking about planning ahead.
Yeah, so that's a big part of what coming to treatment, whether that's at Sophros or wherever you go to treatment, is having a team of people help you to really create a map, slow down and figure out what are some of the things that, maybe make me feel a little bit emotionally off, a little bit emotionally dysregulated. What are places that I have used before? We try to really peel it apart to look at where are the areas in my life that I want to use, and then let's create the plan. Like, that is the biggest thing. It's not about, I'm gonna not have any cravings and I'm not gonna be triggered at all, and I'm just going to surround myself with positivity. That would be great. I would love that for everyone. That's not realistic. We are going to have situations that are outside our control and that all of a sudden come up, smack us upside the head, and are like, wow, this is really overwhelming. And so what we want to do is try to plan ahead all of those potential areas. But even the things that we're blind to, that we maybe don't know, we still want to create a plan. And that's where, the comes into. That's also kind of what Wilhelmina was saying. Okay, some of these holiday events or some of these outings maybe might be a little hard for me. Let's create a solid plan that is unique for you.
Right. And that's when experts come in handy that can help you with the specifics on, oh my goodness, how do I even go about this? How do I get back in the real world after you come out of a recovery situation? But they can help you at Sophros Recovery. And if you have questions, you think maybe this would be super helpful for you to have a plan. Maybe you're already in recovery, but you need some extra help. You can talk to them about that. Their phone number is 904-439-4805. Again, 904-439-4805. And then I think about this when you're doing anything, you think, oh, well, I have my plan. I know what I want to do with my life. I know what my best self is. And then you might tend to isolate to keep that, your little world safe, right? But what is the danger in isolation? That then you don't have the you're not telling anybody.
Right. I think the danger of isolation, that's you, I believe, in a room with your disease, right? You're isolating yourself from, you think you're keeping yourself safe, but right, that can be a potential setup for relapse. I know in regards to the mental and the physical and emotional piece, we talk about the phases of relapse all the time in the scope of relapse prevention, but we have to be mindful. We can mentally kind of set ourselves up for a relapse, just for the thought of just isolation. That can be a precursor to a potential relapse. So isolation is a place that appears to be safe to one, but it's not. It's a place of unsafety, right? And uncertainty. So when we feel those experiences with isolation, it's so important to share that, and maybe with a support person that's community-based, maybe AA or SMART or whatnot. I think that's important. Isolation, again, is not a safe place for the alcoholic or addict.
Yeah, because we always talk about coming out on the other side. I mean, the whole point is to be able to live your life joyfully in sobriety, right? So being alone and trying to protect yourself that way by isolating, and we all know through COVID, that's no fun.
Right.
We really don't want to have to sequester ourselves like we did at that time. And so that is something important to remember. Maybe you think that's a safe place, but eventually you're alone with your thoughts, the same thoughts that probably led you to addiction. So, Erin, I know you were thinking also about some tips that maybe we can give to folks if they are thinking, wow, I've got this trigger I really want to use. What are some other things they can do when that comes up in their mind?
So I think it depends on if it's in the moment or if it's ahead. You know, if I feel like it's maybe building, kind of brewing internally, yes, that's when we talk about it. That's when I know Wilhelmina a few times has talked about using healthy distractions. You know, that's not isolating and avoiding, but that's maybe, you know, Linsey said playing with a dog, you know, it's going for a walk. It's doing things that, you know, maybe I'm going to just watch a movie. I'm not going to only watch all of that. So it's healthy distraction. If it's in the moment, it sometimes is having to remove yourself from a situation. You know, if I don't have someone safe to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes our family or our friends are like, what? You're struggling? What does that mean? And it's like, I'm just having a thought and a feeling and I want to share it. So if we don't have safe people, it's then choosing to remove ourselves and then we pick up the phone and call someone. That is so hard to do because we often tell ourselves like, well, I just want to push through, or I should be able to. That's, I'm using the air quotes for the should. Should is shame, everyone. if we're shitting on ourselves, we're shaming ourselves. So a lot of times we say like, oh, well, I should be able to do this. I shouldn't have an issue with this. It's like, well, yeah, but right now I do. That doesn't mean forever. That doesn't mean that this is a life sentence. The disease might, the work is a life commitment, but this current situation doesn't have to be a life sentence. But right now we are in a mild crisis that we want to stop before it blows up. So that might mean doing something that is really hard and saying no, saying I have to remove myself from this, and then I need to surround myself with people, places. We've said that a few times. People, places, things. These are what impact sobriety and recovery. They also are what feed into, you know, addiction. You know, the people, I say to everyone, be careful what we ingest. This is what we're listening to, what we are watching, what we are eating, who we're spending time with, the things that we are taking in, that we're surrounding ourselves by, impact us. So be very careful around the places you go, the people you spend time with, the things that you do, because they will put you on either a path that is nourishing and is fulfilling and is so deliciously good, or that can completely derail us and make us feel small and scared and alone.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about, thank you, Glennon Doyle, we can do hard things.
We can.
And so, you know, this brings up the point. Will you have to sometimes cut people and places out of your life?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think another point of what I use with clients all the time is identifying what high risk looks like. You know, what high risk, moderate risk, and minimal risk, right? I call them like my no-goes. I maybe could go, and I definitely can go. Will they always be the same? No. Right? You know, maybe you have a lifelong friend, but you and that lifelong friend have drank together for 20 plus years. And that person's not ready to get sober. Does that mean you can never be their friend again? No. But does that mean that we want to be spending the same amount of time we were spending with them before now? Probably not. You know, just because you can do something doesn't mean we should, right? Doesn't mean I have to. So just because I can doesn't mean I have to. I talk to my clients about it a lot. Do I believe you could go sit at a bar? Yeah, I do. Do you have to? No, you don't, right? And so being able to say, what am I winning by sitting at a bar? What am I winning by sitting at a bar, having a water, eating my food? I'm not winning anything, right? That is the drive of willpower. And so not pushing against that, but really being able to break down high risk people, places and things, moderate risk people, places and things, and so forth.
That's a good way to break it down.
Yeah.
You gotta determine the level of risk.
Yes.
I like that.
Right.
Welcome back to Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery. I'm April Davis here with three ladies from Soft Roast Recovery in Jacksonville, the clinical director, Erin Moran, a senior therapist, Linsey Mizic, and another therapist who is joining us for the first time, Wilhelmina Kohn. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
We are talking about cravings and triggers, and, you know, we understand the obvious, whether you're an addict or not, and that, you know, if you go to a bar, you might be there to drink, and that might facilitate a trigger for someone who's in recovery. And there are also really specific things that you may not think of that could also be a trigger for you that I think Linsey can talk about. You had some interesting thoughts on, maybe someone just opening a can.
Yeah, sounds, smells, different types of things that you might eat. A lot of I have a few really good friends that are sober, and they often won't drink anything that's like fruity, that's got something citrusy in it, lemony, something like that, because it reminds them of their drink of choice. Things like that, but the sound of a can opening, ice going into a glass, the sound of pills in a bottle, some people, specific things that you might use to cook with, there are things that those are utilized with, in substance use, and a lot of people don't use them. Payday, money, access to cash. Cash doesn't have a paper trail. You can spend cash on anything. And so being able to realize that everybody's triggers, they're not always people and places, that they can absolutely be things that we don't always realize that we have access to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Some of that could be so subconscious that you're not thinking, oh yeah, I get paid, but clearly that would bring opportunity.
Yeah, which is where so much of that overwhelming can come from, because that's so unconscious to think, I have to worry about money? How am I going to live without money? I have to not put, ice into a glass, maybe you only drink out of plastic, and where that might seem sort of silly, it could be incredibly helpful to not hearing that sound and immediately associating it with pouring alcohol into a glass.
And of course, that's probably a little tougher to have the trigger if no one's around. Definitely support system is key when you're going through recovery. And so how does that come into your life? I mean, is that just family, friends?
Well, when I think about the early recovering alcoholic and addict, right? I made mention of this with a client, and not to sell anything, but they mentioned Mayhem. As soon as they mentioned Mayhem, that's like one of my favorite commercials, right? So I'm seeing Mayhem, he's in this wild space, he's doing all of this stuff, and that can include triggers, that can include maybe you're struggling emotionally, it may look like mayhem, right? But there's a place to where insurance comes into place, right? What are we doing for our insurance to protect us from the outside in regards to the disease, right? So that's when protective factors come into place, right? Support systems, those things that will allow us to be able to utilize our resources that would keep us safe, right? That keep us from isolation, that would keep us from potential relapse, right? So the alcoholic and addict has to be consistent with what insurance, do I have to ensure that I maintain sobriety for today, right? Sometimes we hear a lot, it's just for today, but we have to be mindful of those things, right? So that's when protective factors come into place with support, right, Miss Erin?
Yeah, absolutely. That is friends, that is family, that is your meetings, so whether that's AA, SMART, Celebrate Recovery, mindfulness-based recovery, it's a sponsor, it's surrounding yourself with so many people who are going to be your cheerleaders. And I think that sort of kind of the next part is, okay, I need all these cheerleaders, but now if I'm in the cheering squad and I'm not a treatment provider, like we know how to do that support, this is something that is our expertise. If I'm a family member or loved one, probably like some of you at home listening and seeing, you're this person you care about struggling, it's that part of like, what does that look like? I don't know how to, if I hear someone saying, oh my gosh, I'm having this craving, I'm really just fantasizing about using, or I'm really just struggling, or, being at this holiday event is really hard for me. That's going to be super hard to hear. And it's this part of navigating, like, how do we support them? And I think that, and you all can kind of jump in on this, but I think the way that we support our loved ones who are having the cravings and triggers is, one, just knowing that they're going to happen, is not being scared of, oh my gosh, what if they get a craving? It's, they're going to have a craving, that is a guarantee. They are going to. It's not a if, it's a when. And so I just sort of buckle up knowing that they're going to do that, and I want to be a safe person who they're willing to have that conversation with. So I just say, what do you need? I know this is hard. Thank you so much for telling me that you're struggling.
Right. And of course you want to have people that you can call, that you can reach out to. Maybe you live with someone who can be a support system, and there's always this number you can call in case you need to keep this on speed dial and you have questions for soft roast recovery. As Erin mentioned, they have lots of experts there that can answer all of your questions about addiction and recovery, and their phone number is 904-439-4805. Again, 904-439-4805. You're listening to Healing Your Life with Soft Roast Recovery. I'm April Davis here with 3 ladies from Soft Roast Recovery in Jacksonville. We're talking about cravings and triggers, and we talked a little bit about having a support system. And so how do you go about that? That takes a little planning, I believe, because we know don't be around people that you shouldn't be around that are going to encourage you to drink or use, but what do you do to make sure you have a support system?
Relapse prevention, I mean, I know we talk about this and we harp on it, but creating a tangible plan, something that you can see. It can be really incredibly uncomfortable and difficult to put it on paper, but it's really helpful to put it on paper because, I mean, we make, varying things at Soft Roast. We make relapse prevention plans. We talk about what relapse triggers look like. We make safety plans, and they all serve the purpose of, if and when the time comes, you don't know how to communicate it, here it is.
Yeah.
Right? Just as the same it would be as if, you were in an emergency.
Yeah, like a medical emergency.
Yeah, a medical emergency, and a provider needed to know something about you. There's a paper trail. Paper trails are important, and it can be really uncomfortable to do, but it's crucial to have it, and especially in the times where we can't think and we can't communicate what our needs are. There's nothing more uncomfortable than being in crisis and trying to articulate your thoughts to say, I need this.
Right.
If you already historically can't say, I need this as easily or as often as you want to, let alone when everything's heightened.
And of course, in addiction, you could be in a medical emergency depending on the situation. So that makes complete sense. And we just wanted to mention as well that we were talking earlier about not all triggers are bad. Everybody's pointing at you, Erin.
I'm taking that one. I think recognizing when we hear the word triggers, and I was thinking, I'm like, wow, we could have started with this also, because we hear that word, that buzzword triggers. What I think of when I think of triggers is this is something that is just creating a reaction, creating a response, bringing up thoughts, feelings, sensations. That is what we mean when we use trigger. It's a buzzword for that. A lot of them we have to prepare for the negative ones, the ones that are leading us to a path that's saying this doesn't feel good, or this is not setting me up for the life that I want, being in alignment with myself. Some though are. Some are these thoughts, feelings, sensations that are, oh my gosh, I feel loved. Oh wow, I feel supported. Wow, I'm hungry for more of this good stuff. And that could be this part of, I did share something. I did share a struggle, and someone said, thank you so much for sharing. What do you need? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need me to go and step outside with you? And that instance of someone seeing us, not shaming us, just saying that, like, okay, this is hard and I'm with you. That can be this moment of completely shifting to be like, I want more of this. I want to now do this more for myself, and I want to do it for other people. It's like our energies, our mindsets, our mentalities, our thoughts snowball. When we are investing in something, more of that will come. If I'm going to be thinking negatively about myself, I'm going to be surrounded by a lot of negativity. If I'm thinking, and it doesn't mean, when I say positive, again, that doesn't always mean rainbows and sunshine, but positive could be I'm trying. It could be going back to what you said. This is hard. I could do hard things, and it's hard. That's not saying, oh my gosh, everything's terrible. It's a neutral statement of, this is hard and I can do hard things. That is motivation.
Yeah, having that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, we've talked about this before, because clearly trauma can bring about addiction, and, you deal with that on a daily basis, talking to people about that. And so sometimes those good triggers are shocking to some people, because we're used to the bad stuff, oh, there's a trigger that makes me want to drink. I'm used to that. I'm just going to go drink or use. So I'm sure that takes some getting used to, the good triggers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think talking about triggers is sort of like talking about anxiety, right? Not all anxiety is bad.
Mm-hmm.
I use this very dramatic example in my group setting all the time, as if none of us had any form of anxiety. If a bear came in the room, we're all just going to sit here. We're just going to sit here and we're going to stare at it and we're going to hope for the best, right? But that's
a good
also
one, yeah.
the piece of anxiety is going to give you that reaction. Triggers are meaning I'm having a reaction to something that I am uncomfortable with,
Yes.
right? Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad. If you're uncomfortable, that means where there's a place to change your behavior, right? There's a place to change something. If I'm feeling uncomfortable with a trigger, those are my defenses, and now I need to identify, how do I build a boundary here? What do I do? Right? How do I place these things here for myself, for safety, for my health, for other people to understand what I need? You know, because we talked a little bit about that support piece earlier, is when we communicate, hey, I feel triggered, that's me communicating, this is my boundary and I'm trying to figure it out because I feel defensive. And sometimes people don't like that, right? Families will go, oh, you want to drink? Why would you want to drink? You know how terrible that is, right? Well, here's my trigger and now here's my boundary and I need to figure this out for myself.
Yeah.
So, Wilhelmina, when you're talking to folks and they discover, you know, maybe this new feeling in their life or emotion they haven't felt in a long time, oh, wow, you know, I have accomplished something, or I'm loved, or I'm feeling loved. How do you get them to embrace that?
Well, I think for that person, I think it's important. I always use reflection, you know, maybe 2 or 3 months from now, you think, you know, did you ever feel like you're being this place of, I don't know, gratitude or feeling happy? And that client is someone who looks at their past and they're able to see that their growth has come to this point, right? So I think that is important. You know, I praise the client who comes at a place of, you know, growth, because that's important, right? In this process of recovery, it's about progressing. It's about not being, you know, knowledgeable of this disease, which is trying to, I would say, hurt and harm us, because it is. But we have to, it goes back to our ability to protect ourselves from it, right? So that's when, you know, things come into place, such as soft roast. Things come into place, you know, where we're able to have that treatment and those things that can protect us from the disease of addiction.
Yeah, hurt and harm, for sure.
Yeah.
And so we got to learn how to recognize those good triggers along with the bad, and embrace the good, and know that there is light at the end of this journey. And it's never ending. We know that.
Most
It's a
definitely.
lifelong journey. Thank you so much for joining us today, Wilhelmina, Linsey, Erin.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. You are listening to Healing Your Life.